Hey guys, all right, let's talk about the secret to getting rich and making our money work for us. It all comes down to interest. When you make an investment, the main reason you're making that investment is so that your money can earn more money for you. And this all comes down to interest. Well, there's two types of interest: simple interest and compound interest. We're going to take a look at both, and then I'm going to challenge you to try to work through a problem this evening and bring your answer to those problems as your walk-in work for class tomorrow. And then we'll see who understood it and who might need some additional help. So let's start with simple interest. Simple interest is the easiest of the two to understand. It refers to an interest that is calculated as a percentage of the principal amount. I'm going to use the word principal a lot in this video lecture, so you need to make sure you understand what the term principal means. And all it means, guys, is it's that original amount you started with. It's the $100 or the $500 or the $5,000 that you first put into the account or bought stocks with. That's your principal amount, whatever you start with. Now, some key things when comparing simple interest to compound interest. Simple interest normally gives you a lower return than compound interest does. And the principal amount for simple interest never changes. It always stays that original amount that you invested. Because the principal amount is never changing, your growth, the amount of money that your interest is making you, never changes either. It stays uniform. It's always going to be the same. So once you figure out what you're going to earn in the very first year, that's the amount you're going to earn every single year that you're willing to leave your investments sit there. And so ultimately, you're only earning interest on that original deposit and nothing else. The formula that you would use to calculate simple interest is pretty basic. It's just a multiplication formula. Simple interest is where you take your original amount, the principal amount, and you multiply it times the interest rate that you're receiving, and then the number of years. Do you want to know how much you're going to make after 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20? That's where you just plug in the number. It's important to note, guys, that when we're using this equation, though, when you're working with interest rate, you need to make sure that you're always working in decimal format. So obviously 10% would be 0.1, or 25% would be 0.25, or 5%, which is a more realistic interest rate on some of our savings accounts, would be 0.05. Okay? Let's talk about compound interest. Compound interest is definitely the better deal when you're talking about investing. It refers to the interest that's calculated on not just the principal amount, but also any previously earned interest. Okay, this is the key. Interest is free money. Essentially, what's happening is someone is paying me money to leave my money sit there and not touch it. So let's say I put $4,000 in the bank. They're going to pay me an interest rate to keep my money there. Now, the longer that I keep my money in a certain investment, the more interest I'm going to make. Well, interest then, guys, is free money. So if I can earn interest off of previously earned interest, the free money that I make is going to be more and more and more and more from year to year. That's where the big deal comes into play with compound interest. So obviously, you're going to get a higher return when you're comparing compound interest to simple interest. Compound interest is definitely the better deal because I am getting to earn interest on my previously earned interest, my principal amount is always changing. I can only calculate 1 year at a time when I'm doing compound interest because I'm going to start with a new principal amount at the beginning of each year or each period, because I might have it compounded monthly or daily. That would be amazing if you could find something that compounds daily. Because I'm earning money on previously earned interest, the amount that I'm going to make with this investment is going to grow quickly. And it's going to grow rapidly the longer you leave your money invested. So what am I earning interest on? Again, a reminder, I'm earning interest on the fact, not just my original amount, but any previously earned interest that goes with it. The formula is a little bit more complicated. It involves parentheses and exponents, so we've got to take into consideration the order of operations. Hopefully you guys remember that acronym PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. This has to be done in order to calculate compound interest correctly. And one of the things that we need to understand for compound interest is how often is my interest calculated for a compounding investment. That's when we need to consider the compounding periods. There are lots of different periods that my investment could be compounded. It could be annually, which means that it happens once a year. It could be semi-annually, which is twice a year, quarterly, 4 times a year, monthly, 12 times a year. If you find monthly, amazing, take that investment. You could even find something that's compounded daily. Really, that's 365 times a year. That's rare. If you find something like that, please put as much money in it as you can. But this is important to know how often it's compounded, because that's how often you're going to have to do a new calculation at the end of every period, because what's happening is at the end of one period, you add interest in and your principal amount becomes a totally different amount. It becomes the previous year's principal plus the interest that you earned. It's a little bit complicated to try to talk through, so let's try practicing it. I have a scenario for you. It's the exact same scenario, but in number 1, you're going to try to calculate it if it's only earning simple interest. And then what I want you to be able to see is, now let's put compound interest on the same scenario and see what happens. Do your best, plug in the amounts, and come to class tomorrow with your 2 answers, and we'll see who got it correct. Thanks. Have a good night, guys.